Hey, good morning from Kansas City. Welcome to SportsBeat Live, our weekly conversation talking Kansas City Chiefs with the folks in the media who know them best and with you. We're presented by First Federal. And on today's show, we got a full house of Vahe Gregorian, Herbie Teope, Sam McDowell, and Jesse Newell. And talk Chiefs with us. Send us your questions and comments, and we will address them. So let's kind of get to the news of the moment, and we'll go to Jim Cantore, also known today as Herbie Teope. Herbie, what is the latest on the game status for Sunday Night Football at Tampa Bay? Hurricane Ian just went through there, and they're in the process of cleaning up. What have you heard about the game and what might happen?
Well, as of Wednesday, the Chiefs still haven't heard anything, but the NFL came out and said, look, as of Wednesday, everything is still on track. You can either play in Tampa, and if Tampa is not available, then they will play in Minneapolis. From looking at some of the news reports today, it looked like Tampa was spared. So I don't know what the infrastructure is, if they had to divert attention or some of the medical staff and even law enforcement to other areas of Florida that were affected. We don't know that yet, but the NFL is going to take this up to the last minute. Andy Reid said on Wednesday that they should know in the next, quote, couple of days, end quote. So that should take you to Friday. So I suspect we will know something hopefully either today or at the latest Friday if the Chiefs are going to be in Tampa or Minneapolis.
I would think that because of all the speculation, if the game doesn't move, they're going to have to announce that, right? I mean, we'll get if only from Tampa media, that the game's going to be played at Raymond James Stadium, if that's what they're still calling it, on Sunday night.
And there's a couple of other things in play as well, Blair, because you have to consider it's not just the media, or excuse me, the print media that has to get set up. It's the TV stuff that has to get set up. Normally for a televised game, the TV truck needs at least 48 hours to get in place because they got to do a park and power test. They got to do a satellite uplink test. So a lot of this is really going to depend on how Hurricane Ian affected a lot of the power grids in that southern Florida area.
I'm confident it has nothing to do with the print media. That the timeline is not swayed by us one iota.
I think your confidence is well founded.
Oh, back in the day, though, no.
Yeah, back in the day, it was get on the phone. When can y'all get here? It was not that way anymore. All right, great. Let's do injuries too, Herbie, while we're at it. Interesting injury sheet for the Chiefs. The first one that came out on Wednesday included such players as Mike Dana and McCole Hardman, Chris Jones, Ronald Jones Jr. That's an interesting topic that we'll get to. But tell us what did Andy Reid say about these guys on Wednesday?
Well, the good news, let's start with the good news first. The good news is Harrison Butker, their kicker, who hasn't played since week 1 with that left ankle sprain, did return to a limited practice Wednesday. Jesse and I were out there on the practice field. We did see him alternating kicks with their new practice squad kicker, Matthew Wright. So, and as Andy Reid says, we'll see how this goes leading up to Sunday's game. But having him back on the field is an encouraging sign after the Chiefs' special team snafus in week 3's loss to the Indianapolis Colts. McCole Hardman, Andy Reid says he's been dealing with the heel injury and they're going to shut him down. They shut him down Wednesday. And Jesse asked Andy yesterday, how much has this affected him over the years, or excuse me, over the season? And Andy Reid said, yeah, it has affected him. And so that might explain why McCole Hardman only has 7 catches, 67 yards, touchdown on 11 targets. He hasn't been 100% healthy. Mike Dana still hasn't practiced and suffering that calf injury in week 2. Ronald Jones was sent home with an illness. And then obviously Chris Jones, who was not spotted on the practice field, but the injury report showed that it was not injury related. So that could mean a lot of things. Marquez Valdez-Scantling was also limited in Wednesday's practice with an abdomen injury.
A lot of things for Chris Jones. Give us an example of what it could mean. What's a possibility there?
When I see not injury related, it could mean it's a personal matter. Maybe he had to go home and excuse for personal matters. Sometimes it would say that, but when you see not injury related, of course your head starts to wander, especially in the wake of what happened in Sunday's game. When he got the unsportsmanlike penalty. But I don't want to speculate without knowing for a fact what it is that why he was excused for a personal matter.
Okay. All right. So let's look back at before we talk about the Bucs. When we do our show after the game, it's within a couple hours after the clock hits zero, and we try to cover as much ground in those on those shows as we can. We have heard from Andy Reid and a handful of players after the game. And when it's a road game, you guys, you've talked to players in the locker room as well. Same with home games, but it's hard to get a kind of a full report on what happens after a game. Well, this was such an unexpected outcome. The Chiefs losing as a 5.5 or 6 point favorite in Indianapolis, and there was a lot to talk about, and we try to get to as much as we could after the game. But there some other things have come up in the aftermath of that, or we were able to more fully examine some of the issues that the Chiefs had. And Sam, I know you've written about I'm thinking, of course, about clock management. We didn't talk much about it after the game and how the Chiefs left, almost a minute on the clock, or let a minute run off. And I just thought, in hindsight, what a kind of a significant deal that was. And there was so much, I was curious about after the game, Chris Jones and the special place snafus, as Herbie called them, that I didn't think as much about this, but we should have probably spent more time on it.
Yeah, man. So it's late in the game whenever the Colts converted a first down at the 12-yard line. There's about a minute and 9 seconds left in the game, and the Chiefs should have called timeout, and they had 3 of them. And the Colts are wasting clock. They burned 36 seconds off the clock there. So the Chiefs end up getting the ball with 24 seconds left. Now, Jesse's boy, Isaiah Pacheco, takes off a lot of that clock on the kick return. But they could have had 36 more seconds. And by the way, the Chiefs got inside Colts territory on that drive. And so you wonder what they could have done with 36 seconds left. They also still had 2 timeouts. And it's, the way I phrased it is there's a lot of these decisions. And I mean, Jesse and I are constantly analyzing them in real time in the press box on 4th down decisions, to where, Andy Reid has cited this year that there's a gut feel to some of that. He has Mike Frazier, an analytics coordinator, in his ear, but some of it is a gut feel. And we asked him about the Chargers not going for it on 4th and goal. And then again, I asked him post game about not going for it on 4th and goal against the Colts. And he cites those types of things that I just mentioned. This is a situation that it's 100 times out of 100. The way I phrase it in the column is it's more black and white as opposed to the gray area that some of those other ones have, because there was no chance that the Colts were going to run out of time when they were trying to score from the 12-yard line with over a minute left and 2 timeouts. They signaled that by the fact they're trying to burn time. And when the other team's trying to burn time, you only have one way to stop the clock on defense. As many ways as you have to stop it on offense, there's only one on defense, and it's to call timeout. And I think it's a big gaffe that should have been corrected long before kickoff. So those situations appear. We saw it appear last year against Cincinnati, same sort of thing, to where I think you should play it the same way no matter what. It's not a gut feel scenario. And, these are situations that can cost you wins and losses. And who knows, it potentially cost the Chiefs a chance to at least send the game to overtime.
I want to quickly chime in and reiterate that this really was in real time from Sam McDowell. I mean, turning and making the very point that they should be calling timeout right then. It also makes me think there's a place inside Andy Reid's helmet for you, Sam. I'm sorry, Andy Reid's headphone for you, because I, as much as I hate to say this with you right here, you're pretty right on a lot of this stuff.
I appreciate it, but I will say he's got that guy in his headset already.
I know, but he's apparently not winning the arguments.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit troubling that it's not been enough to persuade him to still, do the things that the math shows he should do.
So a couple things. If Isaiah Pacheco is going to be my guy, I'm at least going to tell you he caught the kickoff at the 3-yard line. Okay, so maybe you can let that roll. If that thing rolls and falls at the 1-yard line, we're all telling how Isaiah Pacheco is an idiot for not returning the ball. By the way, they also got a penalty off that play, which moved him to the 30-yard line. And if you're down 3 points with 26 seconds left, you need some crazy things to happen, high variance. So a kickoff return is one of those high variance things. So if I am going to defend Isaiah Pacheco in any way, he's not really my boy, even though Sam tries to make him my boy. I will say a dribbler on the 3-yard line is one you're probably going to have to pick up and run no matter what. So we'll start with that. I think the biggest thing, Sam, what you're talking about is we are humans. There's too much to process in the moment. There's too much for Andy Reid, for any one individual to process. That's why this is a process over result thing. This is the discussion you have in May, June, July. Hey, this affected us against the Bengals. How are we going to handle this in the future? Who can be on the headset that can only be his only job to say, hey, we've studied this in the offseason. If this happens, then this happens. And so the fact that this has affected them in the past and it affected them in this game, and they still didn't learn from their mistake, it's not a result that they lost the game because of it. It's a process. Why is that not being discussed beforehand so they have an answer for this when they know it might come up in a game? This is the NFL. I mean, all these small things we talk about, how many different plays can we talk about right now? The Chiefs do this different and they win the football game. This is a small thing that could have won the Chiefs the football game that should have been discussed way back last spring. It didn't get discussed. It didn't get talked about, or Andy Reid overruled that. And that, it's not the reason the Chiefs lost, but it's not the reason they won either. So that's kind of the main point of this, is that there's a lot of these small type decisions that could impact games that Andy Reid is not making the right decision on. I'm not really blaming Andy Reid in the moment because it's tough to do as a human. I'm saying they need to have a better process in place so that he's helped with that decision and he doesn't make the wrong choice every time, as seemingly he's done so far.
Listen, a really interesting point. It goes back to that Sam referred to it in his column as Andy Reid's sixth sense and gut feeling. And look, he's had a pretty good track record, but I think you guys are right that my impression is that there's some stuff it's not that they're not preparing ahead of time. It's being overruled in real time, because there's no way that these sorts of things are left to chance within the highly organized, highly structured culture of the NFL to begin with. And I think we know that Andy Reid is that way too, that his staff is that way. So it would be amazing insight to be able to see what the blueprint is before it's actualized, and then the process by which it gets untangled, and often in ways that work out, but as we're talking about now, sometimes in ways that defy logic.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely discussed this stuff in the offseason, and we see that, it's not just Mike Frazier, it's Joe Blameyer, the wide receivers coach, that runs a lot of these meetings. I mean, he ran basically the exact scenario against the Bills last year, with 13 seconds left, which was a kickoff that was a touchback, by the way. They have these scenarios set up throughout the offseason, which is why I do think it's a little bit more alarming that I anticipate they covered what happened in that game and still didn't utilize it the proper way.
Well, just as I'm sure Buffalo has spent some time in the offseason discussing what to do in the situation at the end of regulation that cost them the divisional round game against the Chiefs last year. But I remember thinking as I'm watching the game and the seconds are ticking off in the final minute, that I'm wondering why he's not calling a timeout, why the Chiefs aren't calling a timeout, and I'm sure and then in the next moment I'm still thinking about what Chris Jones did a few minutes earlier, and other things that happened to the Chiefs in that game that created the losing situation for them. Dan asks, was it just a bad kicker on Sunday, or did the Colts show how to beat the Chiefs? We always talk about that. It seems like in each of the last 4 or 5 years, with Mahomes as a starting quarterback, we find, we take a loss and ask if this is the blueprint to beat the Chiefs. I'm not sure this is a blueprint situation because of all the things that happened to the Chiefs.
I just say real quick that there was there was a lot under the Chiefs' control that they mishandled, right? I mean, from the very point we're making right now to let's just look at the first 3 or 4 minutes of the game. When obviously we've talked a lot about Sky Moore dropping that punt, but that was something from which dominoes fell, right? And then if Patrick hits MVS on that, what would have been a 76-yard touchdown pass, that changes everything. And there were, it's easy for us to sort of remember the 6, 7, 8 things like that were pretty pivotal, but there were probably another 10 things like that I think you could say, I mean, obviously credit to the Colts. The Colts won that game, but the Chiefs did many things to help the Colts win. And I don't think all of those were caused by the Colts.
So Kevin Cole does some great work at Pro Football Focus. I know the Chiefs fans didn't think so last week when he came out with what was called an adjusted score, but he basically looks at some of the stuff that is more sustainable in a football game and some of the stuff that's more, for lack of a better term, lucky, and you get an adjusted score based off of it. So the Chiefs against the Chargers did not win that adjusted score. It doesn't matter because the Chiefs won the game, 2-0 in the standings. You will take the win no matter how you can get it. We go to the adjusted score for the Colts. Chiefs were expected to win by 5 points. So it tells me that however you felt about the Chiefs going into the Colts game, you really shouldn't feel much differently going out of it, unless we want to talk about some of these game day things, some of these small decisions. But I think what's not sustainable is the special teams. I mean, that's not going to happen again. Not under Dave Tobe. That was a once in a Dave Tobe era performance. It lost him the game. It's unfortunate, but I have confidence that that's not going to happen week after week after week for the Chiefs. Obviously, Butker coming back would make a big difference. The offense was probably better than we give it credit for. Obviously, did not rush much, but did better in the passing game, I think, than what we would maybe assume just because there were limited possessions. Broke off at least a big play with Juju Smith-Schuster, had a couple passes to Travis Kelce. Mahomes had some scrambles, those sorts of things. I think maybe what we're kind of overlooking here is the defense because defense, great performance. The Chiefs are probably what I thought they were before last week, but they are that because they are better defensively than I thought and not quite as good offensively as I thought, but that sort of balances each other out. And then I think special teams is never going to perform like that again. So I think the Chiefs are fine overall. I don't think that was a blueprint. I think the Colts were pretty lucky to beat the Chiefs. And I think we saw that, but on the other end of it, looking ahead, I think the Chiefs are still one of the top 2, 3, 4 teams in the league. And that puts you in a position to potentially win the Super Bowl. So that's exactly where we want to be too.
Okay. Hey, let's take a break. And we've got to talk several other topics when we return. But let's hear from First Federal Bank.
When I bought my first home, I was searching for listings and negotiating all on my own. Now I'm back in the housing market and I could not imagine doing that again. But then I found First Federal Bank of Kansas City's expert loan advisors at ffbkc.com. They were kind, knowledgeable, and available 24/7. My loan advisor answered my questions and helped me feel confident all the way through closing. I trust First Federal Bank because they understand banking is personal. Apply today for a home loan at ffbkc.com/homes. First Federal Bank of Kansas City. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
We're back on SportsBeat Live talking Chiefs with Vahe Gregorian, Sam McDowell, and Jesse Newell. Brian notes that salt in the wound that Tommy Townsend won Special Teams Player of the Month after that Special Teams dumpster fire. It is kind of interesting. Dan asks if would the Chiefs have a better chance to beat the Bucs if the game was in Minneapolis rather than Tampa Bay? Any thought on that? I would think just neutral field, but to be honest with you, this will be the third time in 3 years the Chiefs have played in Tampa, and they really have all been somewhat neutral fields because the other two occasions were in the 2020 COVID year where I think there were 24,000 at the Super Bowl, and I don't know what the attendance was in the regular season game. None of us were there, but they haven't had a full house in Tampa Bay since at least the previous 2 times they played them, and if they played Minneapolis, obviously a neutral field.
Well, I think one thing, we call it a neutral field, but Sam and I were talking about this yesterday. I mean, if that's played in Minneapolis, it's a Chiefs home game. I mean, not only is it going to be, I think, complicated and secondary to Tampa fans to get to Minneapolis in this instance, but I mean, this suddenly becomes a drivable game for Chiefs fans that maybe don't get to go to too many home games, or ones that are always going to home games. I think it would be a pretty profound Chiefs home field. You guys may disagree, but I really feel like that.
I saw a tweet from BetMGM that if this game moves to Minneapolis, they are canceling all their previous bets on the Chiefs-Bucks game. So that answers it to me. Like, that means your line is going to switch about 6 or 7 points probably. So, I mean, that from the people who make the odds to basically come out and say, if this game changes locations, we are throwing out the bets you made before. That tells me that they're expecting what you're expecting, Bahe. If this thing gets moved to Minnesota, they're expecting a complete Chiefs home game.
What is it now? What did the line open?
I think it opened at Chiefs 2.5. I think I got down to Chiefs by 1. Have you guys seen anything lately other than that?
Yeah, it's 1 on some sites and 1.5 on others. And typically now, because back in the old days, it used to be 3 points to the home team. You'd set the line, then give 3 extra points to the home team. Now it's usually about 1.5. I mean, home field advantage in the NFL isn't nearly what it used to be. You've got to consider you might multiply that by 2 if you do consider this a Chiefs home game. So it might be more like 3 if it's 1.5 and then 1.5 again.
Both teams coming off of really disappointing losses. Chiefs, I think, just based on the opponent more so than Tampa. The 14-12 score in Packers over Tampa Bay last week. So.
Yeah, one of the interesting things about the line, Blair, is the over-under is 44.5. And so I looked that up because that struck me as just such a small number. And according to StatHead, it's the lowest over-under in the Patrick Mahomes era other than one game. And that was a 2019 Denver game at Arrowhead. And I think we all remember that was the game where there was a blizzard before that morning of the game. So snow was covering the field throughout the game. It's the only game that's had a lower over-under line than this Tampa Chiefs game. And heck, both defenses, I think, are pretty good. So that plays into it. But both offenses aren't what we thought they were, at least not so far.
Absolutely. Hey, so Brian asks if we had any thoughts on Shaq Barrett's statement about the Chiefs online. I'll tell you what, let's all hear Shaq Barrett. And when he was asked about online O-line, and here's what Shaq Barrett had to say about the Chiefs offensive line when asked if he sees improvement from the last time they played, which was in the Super Bowl.
Hey, Shaq, from what you've seen in these first 3 games, how different is this Chiefs offensive line from the one you guys faced in the Super Bowl 2 years ago?
I think I really don't think it's too much of a difference. I think we have a lot of favorable matchups. I think we have an opportunity to really dominate the game as long as, I just think, we got an opportunity to really impose our will as pass rushers, edge rushers this game, and we could really have a coming out party. Cause I know we had 6 sacks the other game, but we could really have a coming out party as edge and as edge defenders in the position group for this game.
Well, I enjoyed that, to be honest with you. There's some honesty from an NFL player you don't often hear. Honesty. He told us what he felt. He didn't try to hide it. He knew he was speaking on camera to reporters. So, Sam, what'd you think?
I agree with you. First of all, I think we should applaud anytime a player says what he actually thinks. I'm surprised that's what he actually thinks because this Chiefs offensive line looks nothing like it did in that Super Bowl. Shouldn't say nothing. There's one similarity, and that's Andrew Wiley still plays right tackle. They changed over everything specifically because of that game. And by the way, there's some metrics, including ESPN's, that rank the Chiefs as the best offensive line in football going into this year. They've had their struggles in their first, and actually not week 1, but in week 2 and 3. Opposite, in week 2 was the pass blocking. Week 3, it was the run blocking. Jesse got a little bit into that this morning on the article on Trey Smith. But what interested me was we found out about it. Some of us were on Twitter looking and see that quote during the Chiefs availability yesterday. And luckily, Pete Sweeney from Arrowhead Pride asked Patrick Mahomes about it. And I thought Patrick Mahomes had been pretty expansive throughout that press conference. And suddenly he got really terse with that answer. And so I actually even went back and looked at his answer to that was 6 seconds. That was twice as short as any other answer he gave. And so I told more than twice. So I told Vahe as we're sitting there watching it, I had wondered if it was too long ago for the Super Bowl to play a factor in this game. And Shaq Lawson Barrett, basically just handed Patrick Mahomes a reason for that game to suddenly weigh into this one. And I just don't know that that's a really wise decision. I also went back and looked at Patrick Mahomes' record and these sorts of revenge game possibilities. When he plays the same opponent within a 2-season time span, he's only lost twice to teams he's previously lost to. He's 7-2, but both losses he's taken the team to overtime. So he's not lost in regulation in the 9 times. And the 2 losses, I think we all remember those. And sorry to the Chiefs fans watching that I'm bringing these up again, but one was the AFC Championship against the Patriots. Never got the ball in overtime in that game. Right. And then one was the AFC Championship against Cincinnati last year. The only 2 games he's lost where he's lost last time he faced that particular team, it was also a loss.
I'd just like to add that. Oh, go ahead, Blair.
No, I was just going to say that's I didn't realize that. That's very interesting. Go ahead.
No, I'd just like to reiterate that I hope the Chiefs will appreciate that candor enough to try to acquire him at some point so that he can be someone who regales us. Also, I had heard the clip, but I had not seen how animated he was and almost mocking in his demeanor. And I kind of thought, it would have been enough to speak about if you just worked with, we have favorable matchups, right? We would have pounced on that. But then it's impose our will. He's got to add coming out party in there. I mean, it's pretty good stuff. And I think quite handy for the Chiefs.
Cancel out everything I said and just replace it with Vahe saying, please acquire that guy so we can have him in the locker room.
Well, I like that he thought about being diplomatic at the beginning, and then he just laughed and said, what the hell? I mean, this is how I really feel. And he has to be, it really has to be pointed at Andrew Wiley, right? Since he's the only returning player from that.
I did ask Andrew Wiley about this as well, just to make sure I don't butcher what he said. He said he does that a lot. He talks a lot, so I'm not surprised. We're going to come out there with something to prove, a little chip on our shoulder this week. That's all I got to say. But I did preface it by saying, hey, Andrew, the messenger on this, but I just want to read this as it is.
Well, maybe Shaq Barrett and Mahomes will find themselves on the ground together, and then they'll get up, and Barrett will get in Mahomes' face and say something that none of us ever find out what it is, and get an unsportsmanlike conduct, and that'll help the Chiefs on Sunday.
And they'll trade jerseys after the game.
What a host we have to pull those situations together somehow, Blair.
Oh man. So look, we don't predict scores here. I think often as a group we always kind of feel that the Chiefs have an advantage and they should win. But this is a game that they're not the favorite going in. So what's the feeling here? Let's just say the game is played in Tampa. It doesn't move to Minneapolis. Both teams coming off of tough losses. So what's the general sense here? I'll go first. I think Tampa Bay is going to get enough of their guys back this week who have been injured, and I think Tampa Bay wins a close game. How about let's go down the list. Vi, what do you think?
I think it's going to come down to the end. I really think so, and I think the Chiefs will find a way to win. I feel like there's between the freshly incentivized Mahomes, who by the way would already be incentivized after that game. And I think so many of the things, them knowing so many of the things they did were self-inflicted and cost them this game, I think they'll be sharper. So I think they'll pull through.
All right, Jesse.
Well, real quick, the Chiefs are favored in this 5 points. So it is the opposite way. So you're actually picking the upset, Blair.
Okay.
I'm
standing by it.
I have a prediction due in about 6 hours here, and I've gone both ways. So I haven't really decided that. I don't want to give a pick that I'm going to say now that's going to be different in the paper here come a couple days. But, yeah, this one really has me torn. I thought I had a pretty good feel for the Colts one last week to sort of overreact to Matt Ryan being terrible, and then Matt Ryan was pretty terrible, and the Colts won anyway with all these sort of fluky things. So again, my mind on the Chiefs hasn't really changed that much. I think I just need to dig in a little bit more to the Tampa Bay because it is going to depend on who they get back. Obviously get Mike Evans back. Will Julio Jones be back? Obviously, it looks like Chris Godwin's out, but I think Tom Brady is a guy right now that's dependent on weapons, and if he has a lot fewer of them, then I could see the Chiefs defense succeeding again in kind of an ugly game. But I guess I'll reserve that for right now and make it so that I can go either way still. But this does seem like a competitive game, and Sunday Night Football should be about as fun as they get.
I do think, to stack onto what Jesse said, last week might have been a reminder why betting is so difficult because, God, if you had the Chiefs, you're like 7 points on a muffed punt. How many more points did Sky Moore cost by letting another ball roll to the 1 yard line? We've talked about the timeout situation. I mean, there's a lot of situations that the Chiefs could have covered that what wound up as a 4.5 point line by kickoff. I actually think that the Chiefs are going to win. I do. I just told you guys that this is the lowest over-under besides the snow game. And I actually think that I'm more confident in saying the game's going to finish under than I am in picking the Chiefs against the line. But I think it's about a 20-17 game in favor of the Chiefs. Just one caveat. Steve Spagnuolo had a fantastic game last week in terms of dialing up blitzes. You can't really do that with Tom Brady. He gets rid of the ball much more quickly than Matt Ryan does. And that's going to be, I think, the X factor is whether or not this Chiefs defense has not faced that kind of test yet. A guy that wants to get rid of the ball right away. And I'm really interested to see, how they hold up against that.
Okay, guys, great stuff as always. And we will come to you again after the game on Sunday. So somewhere around midnight. To discuss what happened in the Chiefs and Bucs game. All right, for Sam McDowell and Vahe Gregorian, Jesse Newell, Herbie Teope, and our producer, Monty Davis, thanks for joining us, and we will do it again on Sunday.